and start the recording now. So we're recording today's webcast. I will post the replay to the CA security community as well as these slides that Steve's going to present. And then I will send a follow-up email to everyone with links to both of those for everyone to review afterwards or to share with colleagues if you'd like. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to pass it over to Steve now so he can get started with the presentation portion of today's webcast. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everybody. This is Steve McCullough. I am the market-focused advisor for CA's Privileged Access Management line, and I am joined today by Michael Calvo, who's our subject matter expert on CA Privileged Access Manager. I'm just going to walk you through a presentation for about 15-20 minutes. Michael will follow it up with a product demonstration, going kind of a deep dive on some of the material that we're covering today. This is the third session of 6 overall for our Summer Lunch and Learn series for CA Privileged Access Management. Earlier sessions, as you see, were kind of on the business imperative of doing something about privileged access management, which is breaking the kill chain. Last week's message focused on the simplicity of using our solution. Today we'll be going a little bit more deeply into some of those aspects, not just a credential vault, but what are some of the other controls that you need to really compensate for the attacks that we're seeing with regard to privileged access management. And you see there are subsequent topics following on consecutive Fridays after today. So let's dive right into it. The privileged access management has become an area of focus as a countermeasure against cyber attacks. So some of the breaches that you see, very well known, Home Depot, Anthem. If you frequent any sort of website that is related to security, and even in the popular press, this is the type of slide that is not hard to update with current events. In fact, the real challenge is to keep it updated with the latest events because they're so frequent. The motive can vary depending on what the attacker's about, but generally it's money. Oftentimes it's military interests or personal information, but the damage is real, the threat is real, and privileged identities and privileged access are key vectors in the kill chain. So what is it about privileged accounts? Why are they targeted, and why are the bad guys able to succeed when they can breach these accounts? Well, the first thing is privileged accounts themselves are absolutely necessary. You can't run a computing enterprise without them. The system administrators, the network administrators, database administrators, any application or system that you have has the concept of privileged accounts. The reason for that is that you wouldn't want every regular user to have the authority to configure the application that they're using. Those configuration features are actually hidden from regular users, and they're reserved for high-privileged, well-trained people. And those people either have authority entrusted to an account that they use daily, or more commonly, they're used by privileged accounts that perhaps shared among multiple people. Those accounts bypass normal security controls that regular users are subject to, and they're entrusted to these administrators. But with that elevated privilege comes the potential for abusing that privilege. You've heard of the term insider threat. That's where a case where someone who was entrusted with authority has been misused that authority, or somebody on the inside has stolen their credentials and used that high privilege that the other insider has. But also the attackers from the cyber attackers are targeting those high privileged accounts as well, because if they're on the outside and they want your data, they need to become somebody on the inside. And if they're going to be somebody on the inside, they want somebody with a high level of privilege. So they naturally are targeting these high privileged accounts, and they can be very patient. They often will land with a low level of account, use that to steal the credentials or the privilege of a high level account. Eventually, this privilege escalation is something that they seek. It's a necessary step on the kill chain, and virtually every breach that you heard about involved the misuse of these privileged accounts. As you open up your enterprise to partners, to employees, to cloud-based applications, Amazon AWS, you've increased the surface area for these attackers to succeed. So a hacker can go through some of the same gates that you've got open for these cloud-based activities, as well as some of your employees. And also malware is a very common way that they will compromise even a low-level person to gain a toehold in the account and then escalate privilege from there. And the more complicated your environment becomes, the harder it is to secure all these privileged accounts. So as your environment scales up, the attack surface just gets bigger. So this is the challenge. Another aspect of that challenge is these sysadmins, network admins, and so on, you're counting on them to keep those systems up, running, and optimized. You don't want to prevent them from doing their job. So how do you apply the appropriate controls that still gets productivity from your sysadmins, the network admins, gives them the authority they need to do their job, and still stop the bad guys? And that's really the balancing act that privileged access management solves. So the business goals, again, for privileged access management are to stop targeted attacks, but also to enable regulatory compliance. Auditors have caught on to the fact that, hey, putting in controls around privileged accounts is absolutely necessary because it is used by attackers, so they want you to demonstrate that you have some of those controls in place. I think most people do recognize that the fact that you're compliant does not necessarily mean that you're secure. So you can get the checkbox for the compliance, but still need to do more to stop targeted attacks and to mitigate these insider threats. Also, you want to address the entire hybrid enterprise, especially if you're using cloud computing, virtualization, anything like that is beyond just a couple of computers. The bigger your environment becomes, again, the more you need to secure. Anything that you leave open is a door that the attacker can get through. And as I mentioned, this operational efficiency, this really goes to the point of, hey, I'm an administrator here, I still need to do my job. You can't prevent people from doing their jobs with privileged accounts, but you do want to be compliant, stop the targeted attacks, and so on. So countermeasures that are implemented by privileged access management solutions include enforcing strong authentication of the users and credential management. The topic of today is to describe the Credential Vault, but to go beyond just that basic control. Almost any privileged access management solution that you would look at does involve a Credential Vault. The Credential Vault basically says that without the Credential Vault, you've got 10 administrators who all know the password to this high privileged account, like root. And if they share the password with somebody else, now you've got 11 people who know it. But if somebody does something as the root account, you really wouldn't know which one of them did it because they all knew the password. It could have been any of them. A Credential Vault changes that equation by taking the password out of the hands of the administrators, storing it securely in an encrypted database, and providing a service by which authorized people can take custody of that password that can then be logged. So that's kind of a basic control. But there's more controls that are required to really be secure with privileged access management. That includes a least privilege role-based access control, or what we call a zero trust model. Command filtering. So now that you've got the credential, what can you do with it? Maybe certain users should have the authority to run some commands but not others. And being able to apply those in kind of a whitelist and blacklist type formula is very helpful and a very powerful control. Video session recording and monitoring. This has to do with the user accountability. You've got this shared account that you're using. I want to know what you did with it. I want to see every screen you were on. I want to know every mouse click that you did. For user accountability and for changing user behavior, video session recording is a necessary control as well. And then you can extend credential management not only to named users, but also applications make use of these credentials, and that's going to be a topic of perhaps an upcoming session. So with regard to the external attackers, they're looking for the initial toehold to get access, expand that access, necessarily elevate privilege. This is where privileged access management as a countermeasure is necessary. They're looking for authentication problems like passwords or stolen credentials, maybe stolen SSH keys, shared accounts or lack of attribution where people are sharing the passwords. Where they're going to try to move laterally. You want to be able to put in controls against that. Again, no limits on commands once they've got this privileged account, and there's always a lack of monitoring or analysis around privileged IDs. So again, the controls that we're going to put in place include enforcing strong authentication, login controls, the zero trust access control model, automated sign-on so people don't even have to handle the credentials. It's another way of ensuring shoulder surfing and other password sharing doesn't happen. Command filtering, as I mentioned, what commands can you run and who can run those commands? Leapfrog prevention is an important control. Think about if, hey, you've been authorized to access server A. You have not been authorized to access server B. I need to ensure that if you're on server A, that you're not leapfrogging from there to an unauthorized server, server B. So that's another important control. And proactive policy violation prevention. So that basically means that what do I do if somebody has broken or tried to run afoul of a command filter or a leapfrog rule? What do I want to do about that? Other compensating controls include monitoring and logging, alerting on these events when they happen, the playback of the videos that you're recording, as well as activity logs. Somebody is using this account, somebody logged into this system, complete recording of everything that happened, and integration with your SIEM or your log aggregation system. So CA Privileged Access Manager, as we talked about before, a comprehensive solution in a very compact footprint. It's delivered on an appliance-based form factor that can be a physical appliance, virtual appliance, or even a cloud-based AWS appliance. And it does include a Credential Vault. The Credential Vault is where you store those passwords for those privileged accounts, as well as SSH keys. It's another kind of unseen killer of security because they're an alternative to passwords, but somewhat difficult to rotate and manage. They can be stolen just like a password could be stolen and used by unauthorized people. So the first control is to get the passwords, get the credentials out of the hands of the people and applications that are using them and store them securely in this Credential Vault. Now, to ensure that you're only giving it out to authorized users, you want to enforce strong authentication methods. And whatever you use for authentication is up to you. That is, do you want to use Active Directory authentication or LDAP plus a radius authentication? Do you want to use another form of two-factor like RSA Secure ID? Generally, those authentication schemes ought to be independent of your Privileged Access Management System or maybe CA's authentication, advanced authentication. But whatever you use, the Privileged Access Management solution will allow you to enforce that. So you're using a particular form of authentication and you require that to identify the users. Once you know who the user is through a zero trust model, CAPM will restrict access to the authorized systems that they're pre-authorized for. So you can only access these systems. You will not even see presented to the option of other systems. You won't even know they exist. So you authenticate people, then through a zero trust model, authorize them to only specific things that are appropriate for their role. Once you're doing that, you can automate the login to those endpoints using a single sign-on type of activity. Instead of me handling the password and copying, pasting, or what have you, when they take custody of the password to log in with a shared account on a target system, the next thing they'll see is the log that they've been logged in. They don't even have to handle or use that credential. And then monitoring and enforcing policy. This is the command filtering and the leapfrog prevention we were talking about before. You've logged into this Unix server. You've got a command line. But perhaps you shouldn't be killing processes while you're there. You're there as a database administrator to perform some function appropriate to your job, but we don't want you killing the syslogd process. So we can take away that kill command from you using a blacklist type of operation. An even more restrictive approach to command filtering is doing a whitelist. And that says you can't do anything at all except for these commands that I've explicitly authorized you for. So that kind of takes that zero trust model a step further from not only these are the systems that you're authorized to log into, but while you're there, you can only run these prescriptive set of commands. If you try to go beyond that, you're going to get denied. That's going to cause a violation that I can do something about. The other sort of policy that you can enforce here is the leapfrog prevention that we talked about before. You logged into server A. While you were there, you had some legitimate reason to be there. This server B was not something that you were authorized for. While you're on server A, I don't want you to start an RDP session to get to server B. I don't want you doing an SSH session to get to server B. we can do that through a leapfrog prevention capability. The video session recording and recording sessions, getting the metadata about those sessions is a necessary component for holding people accountable for their actions. So, and if you're using a Credential Vault by itself without video session recording, you still have got gaps. One of the reasons for implementing a Credential Vault is that you want to hold people accountable for their actions. Without the Credential Vault, as we talked about before, you may have had 10 people that knew the password for a shared account, like the root account. If somebody did something with the root account and so many people knew the password, you wouldn't know which one did it. So the Credential Vault provides accountability that by having an audit record that says Bob took out the root account password on this date at this time and logged into this system. But suppose Bob and Joe are both using the same shared account on the same system at the same time, and that shared account made a change on that system. Which one of them did it? The Credential Vault alone will not tell you the answer to that. You have to have the video. So there are several use cases where the video kind of closes the loop on this accountability problem that the Credential Vault starts. They're both necessary controls. They do slightly different things. The other effect that you have with video session recording is it changes users' behavior. You may have strict change control policies that system administrators are supposed to adhere to. That you have to have a trouble ticket, and it has to be part of a organized process. And if they're not following that process, they shouldn't be making changes at all. Nevertheless, from time to time, you have an outage on a system, and you find out later it was because somebody made an unauthorized configuration change. You bring everybody into the room. Hey, who made that change? Nobody admits it. So without the video, you really can't identify information like that. But the video will show you who did that. And in fact, it has a proactive effect of stopping the behavior in the first place. In this case of stopping stupid or a very casual change that an administrator might make, the fact that they're being recorded will stop that behavior because they know they're going to be found out when it happens. So even though it's an after-the-fact control for reviewing the actions, it has a proactive effect on the behavior of the users. And as I say, it's a necessary control in addition to a Credential Vault to ensure accountability of all users. And then logging and accounting for the use of these privileged accounts according to a named user. Everything that you see is delivered through a very compact, almost entirely agentless solution for CA Privileged Access Manager. The only exception to this feature that does require a small agent is that leapfrog prevention that would be put on one of these servers. So coupling with CA Privileged Access Manager is CA Privileged Access Manager Server Control. It's an optional component, but again, provides a complementary measure to the Credential Vault to take those fine-grained controls that the command broker starts and to take them even further on, but with an agent-based, host-based solution. It is not mandatory that you use PIAM server control, but there's sort of an 80-20 rule in place that says the agentless approach that's delivered by Privileged Access Manager is good for 100% of the servers, but for 20% of your really high-privileged servers, like your Sarbanes-Oxley servers or something that has financial data on it, you may wish to use our host-based control to provide this mainframe strength, mainframe-style security for Unix, Linux, and Windows. That control, again, goes beyond the Credential Vault, goes even beyond the agentless controls that Privileged Access Management provides, provide a very powerful segregation of duties that even super users like root and administrator would be subject to. So with that, I intended to use about 20 minutes of that time. It looks like I've gotten that. So I think what to do, Kristen, is to transfer control to Michael and allow him to run with the demo at this time.
Yep, Michael, I just passed the ball to you, so you should be able to share your screen now.
By the way, I just noticed, I'm sorry, I just wanted to close the loop on one more thing. I neglected to mention that the appliance is configured as a bastion host so that it kind of is a middleman between users and the endpoints. I failed to mention that earlier. And that's one of the ways that we can be an enforcement point, not only for access control, but also for the command broker. I just saw that question on the chat window. Sorry, Michael.
Not a problem. I'm just struggling a little bit here with trying to share this. Share.
Looks like it's working. Yep, I can see your screen now.
Okay. Let me just minimize that, and I'll bring it over. Now, are you guys seeing the whole, just the browser?
Yeah, the whole browser window.
Do this. Let me share that whole desktop. I have 3.
It just went away.
Sorry for
okay.
Share. Only give me the option to share the browser, so we'll run it that way. All right, so you guys can see this now, right?
Yep.
So what I want to do is, Steve did a great job setting the stage. PIAM, as he mentioned several times, is an appliance. Now, you have a couple of ways that you can access the product. Now, what I like about this presentation is we truly are more than just a Credential Vault. In fact, prior to even owning a Credential Vault, we were founded as an access product. So that's kind of the first part of the demonstration, is where you see your privileged users coming to this page, logging in, and then getting access to their resources. So I'm going to log in now. Now I want to call attention to a couple things on this screen. As Steve mentioned earlier, we absolutely support strong authentication on the front end to the product. I mean, we can use CA's own one-time password technology. We can use RSA Secure ID. We can do some cool things where we combine what we call composite authentication, where we'll combine not only your AD LDAP credential, but also require maybe a Secure ID one-time password. In the case of this example, I'm just going to log in with LDAP. So this appliance is connected to my Active Directory environment, and I'm synchronizing a user group, and that's how I'm getting access to it. Now, I also want to call attention down towards the bottom. So you have an alternative with PIAM. You don't necessarily have to access it through the browser. You can choose to run our standalone client, and that client can be just installed to run once, or you can choose to have it installed permanently. I'm going to log in with the browser just for the start here. You'll notice I'm going to land on a dynamically generated access page. This is all dependent upon which policies have been granted to me. If I did not have any policies, I would simply land on a page that says you have no policies. But here I'm actually granted access to a lot of different resources. So over on the left, you can see the list of those targets or devices, typically going to be servers, switches, routers, applications, and so on, databases, database servers, and so on. If I click, you'll notice a couple things happen. I'm going to get a remote desktop connection to the server, but I was never prompted for credentials. Right? So right off the bat, we've abstracted these privileged users from having to know these passwords. In this case, I'm logged in as domain administrator. I no longer know what that password is. PIAM has that password under management and can roll it on a regular scheduled basis. You can build jobs. You can have it trigger on actions like being used or being viewed. And in addition to those controls, that ability where we pass that password, don't reveal it to the user, and have it changing constantly, closing that threat window, I can also be contained. Now, one of the ways that we contain people is through what we call leapfrog prevention. So in this case, even though I'm a domain administrator logged onto this server in the domain with all of those rights, I have a policy coming from PIAM that's going to restrict me from moving around. So in my case, I can't open RDP and try to leapfrog from this server to yet another one. When I try, you'll see right away I get an error. You guys can see that error, correct?
Yes.
Okay, wasn't sure if it was being showed. If I try, in my case, I have a 2 strikes you're out policy that says my account is now going to be logged off. Now we can even choose to deactivate that account. So boom, my session's gone. Now within the browser, I can go right to, now being a security appliance, we're logging everything. We log that, even I looked at the logs. Logs take a second to come up because I got quite a bit of traffic on this box. That was pretty quick. And you can see right away in the logs that there's some violations. And you can sort any of the columns in the logs. You can create reports from the logs. You can schedule those reports to be emailed on a regular scheduled basis. If we take a look at some of these violations, you notice you can go right to a video recording that could have been triggered right then when a violation happens. You don't even have to have recording on all the time. You can have it turned on just when a violation occurs. But I can go right to that recording from here, or I can also come to it from in the session recordings list. I like to come this way just because it shows the violations in red. So right away I see that my user on the appliance, while on this domain controller, had a violation. So if I take a look at the recording, you'll notice there's some attribution that goes on. One of the great things about PIAM is that ability to attribute the activity of a user, even if it's a shared account. Now, the Windows recordings play back like a DVD, literally, like you can stop, pause, play. But I want to call your attention to the upper left-hand corner. So right away you can see that I'm logged into the appliance as Alfred E. Newman, but I was logged into that server as the domain administrator. And our recording files are extremely small, and that whole session was only 113K. They're digitally signed, so we know that they've been tampered if they've been tampered with. And the Windows ones can only be viewed on the appliance. Now, if you take a look at the events, I mean, this recording could be theoretically 8 hours long, right? Someone doing their whole day's work. Who has time to review that whole thing, right? So you can go right to the event. Simply by double-clicking on this, it'll take me right to it in the timeline a moment before it actually occurred, and I can see what happened. In this case, I see that RDP was used and that they are being blocked, right? And then I exceeded my maximum number of allowed violations, and my session was terminated. So right away, you get the information you need, you can see what happened, and then you can take your actions. Close the session viewer there. And now I want to show, while I'm in the session recordings, I was playing with various triggers for alerts and alarms, as well as command violations. So what I wanted to do now is log off and come back as an administrator to show how easy it is to do that leapfrog containment, as well as do command filtering on command lines. Now I'm coming in, we're a role-based product, so now I'm coming in with a different role than I came in. My last role, I was a standard user. Now I'm coming in as an administrator using a local account. My landing page is a little slightly different. You get a summary page when you're an administrator, you have that administrator role. What I wanted to show is up under the policies. So to deploy PIAM, that's a question I get often, is like, well, how difficult is it? And one of the great things about PIAM being an appliance is it's extremely easy to deploy. I mean, it's a network device. Once you've given it its IP address, DNS information, and stand it up and get it addressable, the next part of it is to bring in essentially 4 items. Having begun as an access product, we really care about users and user groups to devices and device groups. Now, I could take a look and create a policy, right? Just simply choosing a user, choosing a device, create a policy. In my case, a policy already existed. And there's only 6 lines in policy. They keep it very, very basic and easy to use. How are you accessing the device? Is there any special services? Are we going to reveal passwords on your access page? And then down here, what I wanted to call attention to was our ability to do the command filtering as well as that leapfrog prevention. Now, the way you manage those filters is up here. And right off the bat, we're on the command filter. And it's very easy to create command filter lists. They are whitelists or blacklists. So you can create, you can find right here whether it's a whitelist or a blacklist. On my restricted commands, here's my blacklist commands that I can't run in my environment. Right? We also support regular expressions, so you can get as crazy as you want with some of these commands. Now, I'll show you how that would appear to an end user. So if I take a look at those session recordings now, you'll notice because my role as an administrator, I have a greater visibility. I'm seeing more violations. Before, I was only seeing the ones that that particular user had made. So in this case, I'm going to pull up one for command line. Very similar to the RDP, although this was kind of like Gen 1. It's a capture of everything that happened in the session. It's actually searchable. So if I wanted to, like, if this was an hour long and I wanted to take a look for violations, I can go right into the file and search around. You see the same information like we had on the RDP recording where I'm logged in as Alfred E. Newman. I could see what my violations were, what actually happened. You can go to those on the timeline if you wanted to. All very similar. So in this case, if you take a look, what I've done is one of my restricted commands was SU. So I tried to run an SU. That was blocked. I was warned. Then I tried to do a sudo, super user do, also blocked, and that was my second violation, and I was knocked out. So that's the command line recording. So far we've shown kind of access to the product. You land on this access page. You're greeted with various links to various, whether the access method is going to be RDP, SSH, Telnet. We also support web applications. Another great feature is RDP applications, where we can work with terminal services to just provide access to an app. So in the case of my demo here, I'm just granting someone access to SQL Management Studio. Here comes SQL Management Studio. I don't have access to the underlying server, right? I just have access to that product. I can have PIAM satisfy that second level of authentication, which I think is a great feature. So not only can we log you into the server, but we can log you into subsequent applications. And that carries over to command line as well. So in the case of my sudo, if I was not blocked from running SU or sudo, I would have been prompted for a password for root. PIAM could actually satisfy that password as well, so that your users do not need to know that root password for privilege escalation. Now, if I try to get out of SQL Management Studio, I can't. I don't have access to the server. All I have access to is SQL Management Studio. If I close that, I'm effectively off the server. So that's an RDP application. We also have the ability, I get this a lot with, so if I open up an SSH connection, in my case here, I've associated several accounts, which I think is a nice feature as well. You can choose the account that you want to log into. Sometimes administrators have multiple accounts depending on their action or the work they're going to do. So in this case, we support not only password authentication to SSH, but also key, which I think is a big differentiator. So we make, just like we can bring those passwords under management, we can also bring your SSH keys. And if you've ever done any SSH key management, it's a bit of a nightmare. This product makes it a lot easier because instead of having to distribute all these keys, now you're locking them up in one place in the appliance. Now I'm going to log into this SSH session, very similar to the RDP in that I was never prompted for a password and I'm logged completely in. Now this is our own SSH applet, if you will, that's built in secure file and secure transfer, file transfer. But I also understand not everybody wants to use this particular SSH client. The product also supports the ability to use a client of your own choosing for SSH. In my case, I'm using PuTTY, which I have installed locally. So it actually just called a local copy of PuTTY and logs me into the server without ever revealing the password. So we have that flexibility for SSH. We can support not only our client, but any client you want to use. Another piece that I haven't really talked about yet is the password part. So not only, I've said up till now, we're not only a password vault, but there is times when you need to get to the password vault, right? So we've covered the access part of the product, but what we haven't really talked about yet is the vault and the part the vault plays in. So by having the vault in the background, we're able to perform that kind of auto login experience where I click on RDP or SSH and I'm automatically logged in without ever revealing the password. Because we're able to go grab a password, associate that in policy, and pass it through transparently. Now, there are times that you need to request a password, right? So right from this final column, you have target applications. And they call that because that's actually where a password can reside. So if you remember the four things I started to talk about, right? We care about who's accessing what user, what group, to what device or device group. On the password side, the other two building blocks are the actual where is the password. Does the password reside in Active Directory? Is it a local password on a Unix box or a Linux box? Is it in a database? And so on. So and sometimes those passwords actually be in an application, and we can replace that hard-coded password with an alias. So a target application is simply a place where a password lives. And then the other part, the fourth piece, is what's the account and username and password, right? So with those four pieces, you build policy inside of PIAM. So it's very simple. But what I wanted to show was the ability to request passwords right from here. Now, in the case of this DBA account, I have no workflow associated. I've been approved to view it right away. And you can see that it's an account being managed by PIAM, because no one in their right mind would remember that. Now, conversely, this maintenance account, which I envision as like used to do server maintenance on weekends or nights, has approval because it has a lot of power. So I have to tell the system when I want to use this account for, and it could be in the future or it could be right now. I can click View, and you notice right away a workflow has been kicked off. Now what's going to happen is my email account is going to receive a notification that I will need to approve because my particular user is an administrator and I'm on the notification list. Now I can go right into that and approve it right from the email. I can come into the system and approve it. And then once it's approved, you'll be able to view it. Let me just pop my Outlook and see if we've got a message yet.
Can't see your Outlook since you're only sharing the browser.
Gotcha. I just wanted to, let me see if I do this. It says I'm sharing 3. In any event, I now have the email, and all it says is, this person requested, you want to approve or deny. Not to get back, share. Did it split the screen now?
I see 2 screens now.
Okay, so all I wanted to highlight was the success, right? And I can stop that, and we'll go back to this one. But now, this user, you notice now, across the top, it's been approved, right? So in that other email, I approved it, and now when I come down and I take a look at that account, I can actually see it. And again, it's a system-managed account because it's crazy complex. And that's one of the key benefits is, reducing your threat vector by making these passwords, first abstracting your users from knowing them, and then making them extremely difficult, long, and complex. So even if they were ever viewed or, compromised, they're constantly changing and they're very difficult to crack. And with that, I think I'm out of my 20 minutes.
Yeah, we have a few questions that have been coming in, so we can open it up for Q&A now, everyone. Thank you so much, Michael. And the questions have been coming in the Q&A window. You can also ask them in the chat window, or you can ask them over your phone by pressing #6 or *6, or you can press the phone with a question mark icon, and I can unmute your line for you. There's another question here from Mani. Is there a workflow engine that is customizable to client needs?
So the workflow that Michael just showed is one that's built into PIAM specifically for the use case that he showed. We do have customers that interface with external workflow engines such as ticketing systems because everything that we do through the product is open through API calls, such as RESTful APIs. So it's easy to interface with external workflow systems like ticketing systems through RESTful APIs and other methods like that if you want to.
Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time. I'm going to post a link in the chat window to the CA security community so everyone knows where to go to find the recording and slides if they'd like. I'll also email the links out as well. And I posted a poll, so if you could please rate today's webcast and respond to that poll in the WebEx.
We still have time for other questions if people have them.
All right, let's see. Mani, did you have any other questions? Okay, yes, he has more questions, so I'll let him enter those in. Are there any evaluation options for this product?
Yes, absolutely. So we have the ability to do a customized demo for you via web or on site. We can do a physical proof of concept if you require to see it in your own environment. The simplicity and completeness really comes through when we do a POC. We also can deliver a workshop on site, which is sort of a POC in a box that we would deliver on our own laptop, for example. That would be a case where you could even have some hands-on without touching your own systems. And another option would be to set up a virtual POC where you could exercise all the same things as an on-site POC, but do it in a lab environment that we set up for you in our own lab. And so there are a number of ways that you can get more exposure to the product, either through a demonstration or hands-on, and it could be on-prem or even off-prem.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any other questions? I see one from, okay, here we go. Can this solution coexist with Privileged Identity Manager 1.8?
I think Susan is asking about 12.8. Yep. So definitely so. I guess it depends on whether or not you're using it to control the credential, the password for the same account, in which case you wouldn't need to do that twice. If you're using one password vault, for example, to randomize the password for a particular account, you wouldn't also need to do that. But for the host-based controls or other accounts, they can definitely coexist in the same environment.
Okay, and then another question from Mani. Any privileged account enforcement need to be discovered and onboarded to the CAPM Credential Manager first? Is that right?
Would you repeat that question? Because I didn't see that one. I'm sorry.
He sent it to me privately in the chat window. Are there any is there a privileged account enforcement need to be discovered and onboarded in the CAPM Credential Manager first? Here, I'll copy and paste it to you guys.
No, that's okay. I understand. So yeah, so there are a number of discovery features that PAM has built in, and there are lots of ways to onboard in bulk different things that you're managing. So, for example, we have discovery for directories, Active Directory. We can also do a CSV import to large numbers of devices or privileged accounts at the same time. So the onboarding, the things that you're managing basically is that onboard the devices that you're controlling access to and the privileged accounts on those devices that you want to control access to. Both of those most commonly can be imported through a bulk import through a CSV. It's very straightforward and quite fast. We also have system discovery features that are based on Nmap and things like that, LDAP discovery, and we're enhancing some of those capabilities for Unix in the next release and databases. So getting devices and privileged accounts that you're controlling access to into the product is a very simple matter using one of those approaches.
Great, thank you. Again, if you would like to ask a question over the phone, if you're connected to the audio broadcast on your computer, you can press the phone icon with a question mark, and I can open up your line over your computer, and you can use your computer's microphone to ask a question. Or if you're dialed in on your phone, you can press #6 or *6 to unmute your line and ask a question. You're welcome, Annie. Thanks for joining. All right, if there are no any other questions at this time, we can go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank Steve and Michael for presenting today. And don't forget to join us again next week in this Summer Lunch and Learn series. We're going to be doing another webcast next Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern again. And the topic on that one is going to be privileged access management. It's for applications too. And I will post a link to the next webcast in the chat window. And then we also next week have privileged access management office hours. So if you're a current privileged access management or privileged identity manager customer, you can join those office hours to ask questions. Or you can just come and observe and see what one of our office hour sessions are like for our existing product customers. So I'll post a link to that session as well in the chat window. All right, thank you everyone for joining. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next webcast.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.